Good evening, everybody. This is Bill Howie, and welcome to Thanks for the Memories. Well, my guest for tonight, for the next hour, is a man who really is something of a legend in the business of entertainment. I think his mantelpiece at home must have veritably grown with the awards, not only from his peers and the public vote, but also the official gong. He has an MBE from Betty Windsor. And he also has a record of another kind, which I don't think he is aware of. There's a book out called The Illustrated Encyclopedia of Australian Showbiz. And he shares the honour of being amongst the three notables in the book with the longest entries. One is the late Errol Flynn. One is my guest, Bert Newton. Good evening,
Hello,
Bert.
Bill. Well, that certainly is news to me. And who's the third?
Kamal.
You're joking.
No, I'm
What
not.
a lovely start to a wonderful evening.
Yes, and do you know who's got the shortest entry?
Izzy Die.
No, I hadn't checked to see whether Izzy was in it, actually.
Who's got the shortest one?
Adriana Zenades.
And she or he deserves to have the shortest one.
And she is a famous name throughout Australia, according to the book. She used to be the model with Ernie Sigley on The Wheel of Fortune.
Oh, very beautiful girl. As a matter of fact,
Yes.
I think she's still there, isn't she, with baby John Burgess?
Yes, yes.
Lovely looking girl. And
from
of course,
Adelaide.
yeah, and her name is a household word as far as I'm concerned.
Yep. So I just thought you might be interested in that.
Yeah, and what's that in, the illustrated one?
The Illustrated Encyclopedia of Australian Showbiz.
I've never seen that. Must have a look at it.
Oh, pity I didn't bring the book in this
You get a
evening.
Guernsey, Bill?
No, I didn't.
No. Well, you're so reserved, aren't you?
Yes. I was a little bit upset about that. It's produced from Sydney. Alan Veitch, I think, did part of the research for it, so it's very heavily orientated towards Sydney. Sam Gallier's in it, along with a few other friends of ours.
Sam Gallier, a former manager of 3DB. Then again, hasn't everyone been a manager of... You say Alan Veitch, the comedy writer, who, to me, was best known in Melbourne when he wrote for Graham many years ago at Channel 9. A beautiful story about Alan Veitch. When I was a kid, I used to work as a jockey on a baker's cart for Veitch, the baker in North Fitzroy, Mr. Derek Veitch. I don't even know his Christian name. He's a delightful man. And still living, I'm happy to report, and still at the bakery. And he was wonderful to me as a kid. And I knew he had two sons, one of whom I know quite well, Jeff, and the other I thought his name was Alan. And I worked with Alan Veitch, the writer, at Channel 9 for 2 years, believing that he was the son of Mr. Veitch, the baker, from North Fitzroy. And for some stupid reason, everything I asked of Alan and everything I said to Alan about Mr. Veitch, the baker in North Fitzroy, made sense to him, because I never made any comment about the fact that his dad was a baker. I'd say, how's your dad going? And he'd say, oh, fine, Bert, that's, yeah, he's well, thanks for asking. Oh, what a wonderful bloke. I knew him when I was a kid, as you well know, and give him my very best, and ask him, has he still got those lovely raisin buns, will you? And Alan would say, fine. And obviously, as soon as he got away from me, he'd tell the nearest person, you know, Bert is not a well. And it went on for, as I say, almost 2 years. And all of a sudden, one day in the Bridge Hotel in Richmond, the penny dropped when Alan said, Bert, may I ask you a question? Why is it almost every third day you ask about my father? We're not particularly close. And I said, oh, he's a wonderful bloke. And then all of a sudden we realised there were two Mr. Veitches, and I had the wrong Mr. Veitch.
Isn't there another Mr. Veitch, Patrick Veitch, connected with the Australian Opera, Australian Ballet, something
Could
like
I
that?
just leave it at the two that I've messed up already?
We want to chat about your life a little bit. I want to go back into the not-too-distant past. There's a book out, which you've probably heard of, Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. It's got a wonderful opening line. I think it's the best line to open a novel. It's called, It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I was thinking about this the other day when looking back in the last 2 years, from 1986 onwards, whether that phrase could really apply to you for those 2 years.
Yes, in other words, the DB experience.
Well, the DB experience, I'm thinking of even more lately the Ray Martin experience, where you had all those hosannas, not only from the press, but also from the public in the terms of ratings, and yet nothing came of it from Nine.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good description, Bill. What does he say again, Mr. Dickens?
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Yeah, I suppose the last couple of years have been the most unusual in my career. From a professional point of view, there have been a few highs and certainly lows too. But particularly for that period of time, for the 2 years, I think especially of DB, and you and I were very close to that scene. For those people who don't know, Bill and I shared managerial duties at DB under some most unusual circumstances. We had, 5 owners in 7 months, and we endeavoured to get a format called Melbourne's own 3DB, the new beginning, off the ground. But unfortunately, after about, 5 months, the Herald and Weekly Times, excuse me, which had owned 3DB for 61 years, sold, and then we went through those owners we've talked about. So it was a bittersweet experience as far as I'm concerned. I got the opportunity of working with some terrific people, a wonderful staff. But I've had my share of failures in my professional life, but I thought this time around with 3DB, it was going to be a success eventually. I thought it would take at least 2 years, and of course you don't need to be told, Bill, we didn't get those 2 years. So from 86 to 88, I'll always remember that particular period, for the reason that we tried for something which I know was attainable, but unfortunately other forces came in. No one specifically. I'm not knocking anyone. It was just a case that I didn't guess that the station would be sold. Certainly not as many times. And I find that still a little depressing to look back on and know that we could have been successful. But then after having left DB, I know what you're picking up on, and that is that I had a couple of things happen to me on television, which were bittersweet, and which were the best of times, and in some cases the worst of times. I did an appearance on the Logies, which, from most people I've spoken to, most people I trust, I should say, I got good reaction. There was some bad press reaction to it, but I lived with that. That's part of the game. And then the 60 Minutes story, which was done as the result of my Logies appearance, I thought was a good opportunity for me to cleanse my soul of any alleged sins on the Logies performance. And then came the brightest light of all since I left Channel 9 in 1985, and that was the chance of returning, be it only for a week, to do the Ray Martin Show and discover a program the likes of which I hadn't really compared before. I'd done daytime television before, but I certainly not in an era where you had as much money to spend as the Martin Show has. I'm going back to, 58, 59 when I was doing daytime programs at 9, and the budget would literally be, £30. And that experience on the Ray Martin Show was one of the most enjoyable experiences I've ever had in television or radio, because I found that I got to an audience which I liked very much, and obviously from the reaction liked me too. Out of that grew a desire on my part to perhaps pursue that area of television. It was misconstrued in a couple of places. I wasn't after Ray's job. Ray had mentioned quite some months ago that he was thinking of moving on to other things, and what I wanted to state, and state pretty quickly, was that if there was to be a change, if Ray was to go to another program, I wanted them to know that I'd like to be on a short list. And if it's not going to happen at 9, I don't think Ray's going to leave the program, but that's fine. There's no reason why he should, because he's a good performer, an excellent television man, very good journalist, and I say all of those things with no bias, because I don't know him very well at all. I think I've met him only 3 times in my life. But if he's staying put there, it's given me the inspiration now to look for that sort of thing elsewhere.
I've heard from an outside source, and you may not wish to comment on this, that there are a couple of people at Nine who have a grudge against you, and that could have been in the way of you taking over that program.
Well, I wouldn't know who they were, and I wouldn't know why they'd hold a grudge. Obviously, it would have to be one or two people or three people or whatever who knew me from the old days, because I was there for over 26 years. It could, well, I suppose it could be somebody who's just come into the place, I don't know, with some power. I haven't worked for Gary Rice, the present manager or managing director of Nine here in Melbourne. Matter of fact, I think he's got a change of title now. I think he's certainly moved up one or two. I haven't worked for Gary, but I've met him very briefly in a social sense, and I don't think he holds any grudge against me. Would you like to name them?
I was not given a name. I was told that there was somebody there who just had a bit of a grudge against you.
For what reason, Bill, do you know?
Oh, just probably didn't like you.
Well, that's a good enough reason.
Didn't like your work.
Oh, that's fair enough. Well, I thought you meant a personal
Oh,
thing.
no, I'm sorry I gave that impression. I didn't mean so much a personal grudge, but just didn't like your work.
Yeah. Oh, well, I accept that. I mean,
and was prepared to fly in the face of public opinion.
Yeah. Well, if and of course, if the person in question has power, I'm in strife so far as Nine is concerned. But I accept that. You've been a manager. I've been a manager. I've done some producing on television, and I'm sure that I haven't used people that you would use immediately, and vice versa. In the top echelon at Nine, thinking of the executives and the producers, I'm friends with people like Gavin Disney, who's the executive producer of the most successful television show in Australia, Hey Hey It's Saturday, or certainly one of the most successful. I'm sure he'd be very for me. Most of the other people I've worked with for a long time, I think of Sam Chisholm, who's the chief of the Nine network, executive-wise. Sam and I have never had a cross word. He obviously wields a lot of power, but then again, as you say, if it's someone who just doesn't like my work, well, that's the end of the penny section. I'd be very upset if I thought it was at a personal level, because I do pride myself on endeavouring to do the right thing by people. I'm not a backstabber, and even though you and I didn't know each other very well during our 9 years together, by 9 I mean the Channel 9 years, because you were working at AK in the same building and I was with Nine, I would like to think that I enjoyed a reputation of playing the game, and I don't think many people would have disliked me personally. They didn't have to be enamoured of me, but I don't think many people hated me.
No, I was very surprised at the comment. It just came to me from another source, and I just wondered whether you felt that there might have been any truth in that. But there's so many rumours. There's so many rumours in this business, anyway.
Yeah, I usually find that most of the rumours in this industry, well, there are enough of the rumours in this industry to prove eventually to be correct. I don't know. Well, it could be just someone. I mean, I'm sure you don't want to linger on the subject, except for me to have the opportunity of saying that if someone doesn't like my work and is in a position of power at Channel 9, well, that's fair enough. There's nothing I can do about it. But I hasten to add again, if it were at a personal level, I would do something about it, because I can't think of anyone with the Nine network for whom I harbour a grudge, and I wouldn't like it to be. I'd like it to be, a case of a both-way situation. If I don't harbour any grudges, and if I haven't got anyone that I've got in line to dislike, I'd like to think that it was, what am I trying to say? I suppose two-way traffic.
Well, what about the immediate future? Maybe we should leave that towards the end of the program, which is a normal closing, but we may as well tackle that right now.
In the immediate future, I think I might endeavour to increase my vocabulary so I can think of two-way traffic. Perhaps get the mind in order.
Well, all right, let's get off that. On to something else now. I think you would agree with the way, I think especially the press treats the subject, that it's almost something to be ashamed of, to parade one's love for one's family and one's religion there are always the normal photos that would appear in TV Week and the like of a star with the family, but generally the press seem to have a very cynical attitude to the love of one's family and one's religion, and you've never been ashamed of both.
No, I haven't. I don't know whether I would agree that the press feels that way about love of family and religion. I suppose now, Bill, it could be an indication of where the world is heading. Or then again, it could be a case of where the world finds itself. There are many of the principles and the attitudes and the standards of yesterday which I think are very worthwhile, and they're not held in the highest of regard these days. I was told many, many years ago by a very wise man, Arthur Corwell, that today's radical is tomorrow's conservative. I've always tried to be very careful that I don't sound like an old fogey or a prude, because I'm neither of those things. And anyone who knows me really well, and especially anyone who knew me very well in years gone by, I had a pretty enjoyable youth. Some people would call it relatively wild. I enjoyed myself very much, and in all respects. But I always tried to keep together the sort of standards which were ingrained in me by my family and by my teachers, who happened to be a religious order in the Catholic Church, the Maris Brothers. But now, as I look back on my life, I realise that not necessarily through any experience I've had, just because the world moves on as it must move on, some of my standards and the standards of people that I know very well aren't necessarily those of the leaders of nations, the leaders of state. I don't mean necessarily in a political sense only. Civic leaders and people in very high positions in Australia and in other countries. And I think that's a great pity. Without getting political, I think that something which happened just recently with the announcement of a position here in Australia being filled by a former politician, I think the manner in which it was carried out was a farce. And I think there are certain aspects of that appointment which are a farce. And yet, I believe the man in question is one of the finest Australians that I've shared this country with. But I really cannot believe that Bill Hayden, after spending so much time in denigrating the office of Governor-General, can then turn around and accept it.
Now, you're a political animal, so did that really surprise you? Or do you feel politics have changed so much since the days of Cornwall that you expect a degree of cynicism from your elected member?
On air, I endeavour to remain always apolitical. So whatever I have said on air in the past about politics, particularly during election time, or including election time especially, I think it behoves anyone on air to give all parties a fair go and remain apolitical. I don't believe that happens in Melbourne radio with everyone. But I think with the Bill Hayden appointment, we reached a new era in the unbelievable fabric that is being woven in Australian society. Arthur Corwell aside, I suppose Arthur's views on politics would be considered now very old-fashioned, and he is a man of the past, and I accept that. But back in his era, that couldn't happen, and anyone who throws up the names of Sir Paul Hasluck and the various other appointments which have been made throughout the years as Governor-General from the political ranks, I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about someone who has, as I've said before, held up the office to ridicule. But I've got to add once again that I think he's a great man, but I just can't understand how it was so easily accepted. What's going to happen now, of course, Bill Hayden is going to go ahead and become one of our greatest ever Governor-Generals, and I don't dispute that that's not possible, and I hope it happens. But I feel the apathy which many of we Australians suffer from. I think that was one of its finest moments.
Do you sometimes think the office is a little too dignified? Everybody rubbished Sir John Kerr for his appearance at the Melbourne Cup and that remarkable
Well, that
day.
wasn't dignified, was it?
No, but that's what I'm saying. I thought it was a lot of fun, actually.
Yes, I don't know whether it was the Melbourne Cup. I've got a feeling it wasn't the Melbourne Cup, but there was another meeting that Sir John attended, and a mate of mine happens to work for a racing club, and sometimes it's his duty to open and close the door for VIPs as they come and go from the dining room. And his comment on Sir John Kerr on this particular day, and as I say, I really don't think it was the Melbourne Cup, I think it was another course anyway, but he said that he's the sort of man who becomes more affable as the afternoon wears on. I'm not too sure whether there would have been so much criticism and he would have been held in such low regard after that Melbourne Cup incident if 1975 hadn't happened. Perhaps he would have been seen as a good bloke and one of the boys. I know it was a very cruel cartoon, but who was it on the front page of The Age? Was it Tanner? Who had...
Tanner or Tanberg?
Yeah, or Tanberg.
Mm.
It was the winner of the Melbourne Cup that year, I think you'll find, was red-crested. And I'm sorry, red-handed. And then he had running third, Sir John Kerr, with quite a bulbous red nose. There were 3 reds filling the placings, 1, 2, and 3, and it was quite a nice. Isn't that strange? I can't think actually who won the cup. It was red-handed or red-crest. It was red-handed. Anyway, there were 2 reds, and he made Sir John become the 3rd red nose.
Let's pause for a little music. I asked you to select some of your favourite. Your arm wasn't twisted in selecting one of Patti's tracks?
No, as a matter of fact, Hear Me Play. It's a lovely song, and it's a song I believe that Patti does very well. When she and I married back in 1974, she really had that quote again from Charles Dickens.
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
We married in November. I proposed in January. We married in November, but unfortunately in February, in an intervening month, her dad died very suddenly, Matt McGrath, and he was a wonderful bloke. And when some years later we put an album together, which is called the Bert and Patti Family Album, there's one copy here, which I brought in for you, and the other copy is at home. There was one track that I asked particularly for Patti to sing, because I know it means a lot to her. And invariably when this is played on radio, and usually by me, I haven't heard anyone else play it in a long, long time, it engenders a lot of reaction, because there are many songs that are written about mothers. There have been very few written about the downtrodden race to which you and I belong, Bill, and that is the race of dads. And this is one, I think, which tells the whole story.
my papa, Patti Newton, alias Patti McGrath.
Not alias, if you don't mind, Bill. Nee McGrath, not alias. My dear mother-in-law, Eunice, who'd be listening this evening with the kids, Matthew and Lauren. Let me say that many years ago, it was her belief that the Patti was really Patti McGrath even after she married me. She said to Patti once, of course, you're really still Patti McGrath. I mean, just because Patti, I think actually what Ewan wanted was for Patti to continue in show business, being known as Patti McGrath. So I said to Ewan, whom I get along with very well, we love each other, or I certainly love her. I hope it's two-way traffic. I thought of it that time. I think that she just simply wanted Patti to continue to be known as Patti McGrath. So I said to her, Ewan, that makes you then Eunice McGowan, because that was your maiden name. She said, oh, no, I'm Ewan McGrath. I said, well, Patti's Patti Newton, I can tell you that.
I was saying to you before we commenced the interview that I had thought of having both you and Patti in the program, but because you've both got very interesting stories, I thought I would talk to you each separately, and I hope to be chatting with Patti in the next few weeks.
What's Patti's interesting story?
Well, that's what I plan to find out. But I suddenly also thought that there's Matthew, then there's Lauren, there's you, and I could make a whole career just interviewing the Newtons and the McGraths.
Yes, like the American King family singers, we could become known as the Newton family singers.
Yes, we remember them well. OK, let's take a commercial break. You're listening to Thanks for the Memories with Bill Howie. My special guest this evening is Bert Newton. Bert, partners have always been pretty important in your professional life. I'm thinking of the three main partners that you've had. Graham would have been the first one, wouldn't he?
Well, yes, he was the first one of any significance. Before I went to television, I had some people, I guess you'd see as partners on radio, but not with any great success. So Graham would be number one.
How did you enjoy working with him?
Oh, very much. We were friends long before television came in. Well, certainly a couple of years before television came in. We were young blokes kicking around Melbourne radio in the early 50s, and we got along very well. He then went on to great things in television at the near start of television. I think it was May, well, I know it was May 1957. And within weeks, most people with any sense realised that there was a very special talent being seen on Melbourne television. Not everyone, I might mention. I think it took some people, particularly some of the critics, a long time to realise that Graham really was a one-off and a very talented person who did it like nobody else, and also did it with so much success. He was, back in those early years, he was such a fresh young talent, 23 years of age when he took over in Melbourne Tonight and made it the most successful, one of the most successful programs Australian television has ever seen. And I then followed him into television, pardon me, excuse me, I think June, a couple of months after he started his television career, I began mine at Channel 7 and was there for 2 years, and then television really began for me in 1959 when I went to Channel 9, and originally it was Norm Spencer's intention. He was the production manager and program director and the brains behind it, Melbourne Tonight. It was his original intention that Graham and I would never appear together on television. I was to do a morning program in which I would endeavour to do for morning television what Graham was doing for nighttime television, and that was make quite a bit of money for the station. And I don't think I did all that much work for the first 4 weeks, 5 weeks that I was there. I did one breakfast program at OB from Sorrento, which was quite successful, and I did some booth announcing and a couple of commercials, but never in Melbourne Tonight. And one night, one of the announcers took ill or suddenly drunk or something, and Norm called me aside and said, I'd like you to go on tonight and do a commercial with Graham, remembering that it's a once-only situation. It was a last-minute thing. The show began at 9:30, and I think I knew at, 25 to 9, that I was going on with Graham. And it was a commercial for, what was it? For some reason, in previous times, I've said Rail Merton Shoes, but it wasn't for Rail Merton Shoes. I guess it's unimportant what the commercial was for. What was important, two things. Number one, it was a 30-second commercial, which went for 27 minutes. And secondly, even though I say it myself, it was very funny. It was a very funny commercial.
Were you nervous?
No, not at all. As I recall, I mean, it's a long time ago, and I haven't got total recall, but I do remember that it was one of the biggest buzzes of my life so far. It was, it was television the likes of which I'd not worked in before, and I'm not too sure whether Graham really, in a situation of partnership, had worked in it before, and he realised that we had chemistry, and I realised that we had a lovely rapport. When I came off, Norm Spencer asked to see me after the show and said, "Forget the daytime program, you're Graham's partner as of tomorrow night," and that's how it began. And it was a very good partnership. I love his humour. I enjoyed working with him very much, and those years, of course, even apart from Graham, were very special because of the quality of people that you got to work with. Lovely people. I'm not saying the people around today aren't lovely, but there aren't as many vaudevillians around as there were then. People like Joff Allen and Frank Rich, Evie Hayes, Tony Lamond, lovely theatre people from whom you could learn so much, and also who were such fun to work with both on and off camera.
This chemistry that you had with Graham, did you have the same kind of chemistry with Don and then later with Mickey de Stoop?
It wasn't the same sort of chemistry that I had with Don. It too came out of left field, but it was a chemistry that I would place as important as the one I had with Graham, because I think because they're relatively recent years, a lot of people are inclined to downgrade what Don Lane and the Don Lane Show did for Australian television, given that a Melbourne Tonight was quite a unique program. You've got to remember that the Don Lane Show was the highest rating Tonight Show in the history of Australian television, given a 3 commercial network system in Melbourne and Sydney and beyond. And it went for 9 years, almost 10 years, and it excuse me, it opened up some brand new fields of television in there. I mean, it opened up the satellites overseas. It also was the first Tonight Show, out of Melbourne anyway, with any great success, that was done primarily on the American format of lots of talk, lots of interviews. Comedy, certainly, and that was my role to fill, to provide the comedy with Don. But Graham's years with Melbourne Tonight, and indeed most other variety shows in Australia, there was a very heavy emphasis on the desk area, with Graham, being the king of that. And then a lot of stuff coming from centre stage, sketches, and of course the singers and various sight acts. But in Don's case, the majority of the program happened at the host set, and I think only for the reason that it's only a couple of years since it finished. I don't think the Don Lane Show has been placed correctly in the overall picture of television in Australia, the history of same. And I think in years to come, people are going to look back and realise just how much that show did for television and also for television performers.
It's interesting that your chemistry was with 2 men. Now, what prompted the chemistry? I assume there was a chemistry with Mickey de Stoop.
Well, there certainly was a chemistry with Mickey de Stoop on DB. Once again, we'd been chums for a long time. Didn't know each other all that well in the early years at 9, when Mickey was doing No Man's Land and I was doing all the things that we've been talking about. But I just found Mickey on radio at DB to be, number one, so easy to work with, a very good journalistically based interviewer, and we genuinely like each other and we genuinely make each other laugh, which is good. I mean, I know a lot of other people who work together and they make themselves laugh, but nobody else really thinks it's all that funny. That's a great danger. I think that managements and producers sometimes make the cardinal sin, commit the cardinal sin, of getting 2 talented people, 2 individually talented people, and putting them together and imagining that what they're going to get is double the input of talent. That doesn't necessarily happen. There's got to be a chemistry. There has to be a rapport. They have to, well, it helps if you like each other. I know some teams that have been very successful who haven't liked each other, and indeed, I mean, haven't talked to each other unless it's in the line of business. But if you get those things going for you, I believe that in my career I've been blessed. You'd be lucky enough to have one partnership which works, but when you've got 2 major ones on television which have been terrific for you, and then an excellent one with Mickey on radio, it really is a triple blessing.
Would that relationship with Mickey have translated over to television with the same effect?
I don't know. I've got some doubts there. May I ask you a personal favour? If you just take my mic off for 1 second, we have one really good cough, and then I'll come right back with you.
Well,
Thank you, Bill.
That was a ripper.
Yeah, well, it's do Ernie Sigley proud. It's been a very long Father's Day.
Yes.
And you didn't twig, of course, before I played "Oh My Papa" for Father's Day.
Yes.
Did you really? Oh, you didn't mention it. Yeah, I don't know whether it would have transferred Mickey and myself onto television. There's no reason why it shouldn't have done, but it just seemed right for radio at the time. I do regret that Mickey and I weren't heard by more people for the reasons I've given already, that the DB was a low-rating station. Had we been on a high-rating station, I think that it would have been seen as a pretty important partnership, because she's a very talented person, Mickey de Stoop, and I think the differences between the two of us, I mean, there's one obvious difference. She's a woman and I'm a man, but the other differences are that she leads a different lifestyle to me. There's a 10-year age difference, which in itself brings about a lot of interesting material and also a lot of funny material. And radio-wise, I do regret that didn't continue and wasn't allowed to fully bloom.
Mickey, do you think it would have translated over to television?
One thing I want to point out straight away, I'm the 10 years younger. Not the 10 years older.
How are you, Don?
How are you? Good. How are you, Bert?
Thank you, missed that, unfortunate. I'm very well indeed, thank you, my love.
How are you, Bill?
Excellent, excellent.
I've been having a wonderful time here, you know. Guess what I've been doing all Sunday afternoon?
What have you been doing?
I've been going through my rather extensive record collection here, and it took me a while to get round to pre-1955, Bert.
Thank you.
But I've managed to drag out a couple. Are you in the mood for a little quiz?
Certainly.
You're allowed to go in this too, Bill.
Oh, thank you.
But I think you're more contemporary too. But we'll see how we go. I've got an Eddie Fisher Sings here. He was 23, by the way.
Right.
But there's one here that I just want to see how good you are, Bert. It's got a very nice cover. It's a Wobble and Goggle, the W&G selected releases on the Diaphon label. Right, and it's just got on the top the greatest selling LP in Australia, recorded at the farewell concert at the Sydney Town Hall, November the 18th, 1952. Who was it?
The Horry Dargy Quintet.
Well, a Harley Quintet, it says here.
Well, yes. No, well, they're wrong and I'm right.
Extraordinary.
That's the beautiful album on which they do the thing on Teddy Bear's Picnic.
Exactly.
And anyone who's over 40 years of age will love the tag, in which they say, don't go down to the woods today. If you do, Edwin Duff will get you.
Mickey, I understand it's a bit of a two-can Coke day today.
Yes, I've had to have a couple of Cokes today, Bill. But how kind of you to bring it up.
I believe you had a big night.
A very early morning, actually, sweetheart.
What were you doing?
It was. I just got together with a few of my friends at the club, you know, my little cricket club up here in the valley, Bert and Bill, and yes, we got together last night. I went down for one quick drink.
Mickey, would you do me a favour? I've just been espousing your virtues here on radio on 3AW with Bill. Did you catch what I was saying before you came on air?
Absolutely.
Well, for God's sake, be funny.
But just getting back to the question I was asking...
Bill, can I just ask about one more record? Just see how...
Oh, right.
There's another very little-known fellow. I think, unfortunately, he didn't really make it very big in Australia, but I think it's time for a revival for him. He's a fellow who worked extensively in Britain, and I've got a record here of him working with the Sid Lawrence Orchestra, and he's a fellow called Kevin Kent.
Thank you.
Do you remember him, Bert? What a talent.
What an absolute crumb you are. The hangover which you're suffering now, I hope it doubles on you. I hope that tomorrow, that all your, what do they say, your chickens turn into emus and they kick Joe down?
I've got two here, actually, Ida and Sam. They're wandering around here at the moment.
Oh, lovely. I might mention to everybody that Kevin Kent is a fine singer, quite an elderly singer from England. And when Patti spent 3 years in England, she and he, in parenthesis, fell in love.
Held hands.
Yeah, I soon fixed that, though. I flew over and threatened to throw a punch and also hit him if he wasn't careful. So
there we go. Kevin Kent, folks. If you're if you're in one of those record stores at any stage where they sell very old, second-hand records, look for a Kevin Kent.
I tell you what, though, he was considered by many people to be before his time. I personally thought that he was way after his time. But he's got a nice voice, hasn't he?
Well, wonderful voice. I just love the accent, too.
Yeah. Well, if ever you're in London, Mickey, as I've mentioned to you before, always pop into the South London nursing home and say hello to him.
Kick his crutches out from under him for you.
I didn't say that.
You would.
It's been a long time.
I'm not sure that I like the idea of us not being able to work on television together, Bert.
No, I didn't say that, Mickey. I did not say that at all. I said I don't know whether we would have worked well on television together because we hadn't tried it. But I hastened to add then that I was just so sad that we didn't have the opportunity of continuing on radio because Bill has mentioned already the other partnerships, and I tell you what, the time that you and I spent together on radio was as enjoyable as anything else that I'd done in my career.
It was a lot of fun, wasn't it?
It was terrific. And it was just lovely to work with someone who had a deeper voice.
Well, I just thought on television it'd be wonderful. You could wear the kilt and I could wear the jeans.
No, I think only at parties, eh? As it's always been.
I sort of feel like a moderator here.
Poor old Bill's not even getting a word in. How are you, Bill?
I am extremely well, extremely well. I've had a very good Father's Day.
I believe your show is doing great guns. I've had fabulous reports.
Mickey, let me tell you, of all the people that got the lemonade from 3DB, old Mother Howie here, he's the one who's killed them.
He's gone to heaven.
Well, he's got a travel program. He goes all around the world between Monday and Saturday, comes in and does this program on Sunday, knocks off my idea of thanks for the memories, just makes it plural and thinks that, I'm not going to notice the fact that it was the title of a program that I ran on 3DB, or it was, as manager, I put it in on 3DB in almost precisely the same time slot. He's very interesting to work with in the studio, Bill, because he's very, very quiet in approach, and when we first started this, and I'm not, as you well know, Mickey, when we first started this little hour together, I didn't hear Bill's first question because I was going to say, he speaks quietly. Frankly, he mumbles.
I've had the pleasure, actually.
I believe so.
To go.
Yes, and I tell you what.
It's on the show, too.
If Bill's wife finds out, you'll be in real strife.
It's not the wife I'm worried about, it's the mother-in-law. Mickey, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Pleasure I can get back to. I'm working my way, as I said, through the 1950s of my albums now, and there are a couple I'll send both of you.
Give us one more, please.
Right, Freddie Gardner.
Yeah.
And his golden tone saxophone. What can I ask you about this? When do you reckon that would have been recorded, roughly?
I don't know, but I reckon the orchestra would have been Peter York and his concert orchestra.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, let's pretend that was the question.
That's your sensation. I've never been able to catch you out.
What are we talking about now?
Yes, let's stick with the records.
Good on you, kiddo.
Have a lovely night, you two. I wish I was there to be able to listen to it all the way through. And thanks, Bill, for inviting me back on.
Thank you, Mickey, to Steve.
Take care of yourself. Where's the next trip to?
Home.
Home, yes, and then I think in a couple of weeks to North Korea.
Wonderful.
We're having a wonderful hour, actually, Mickey. It's being subtitled tonight, Ada and Elsie, revived.
For the memories, fellas.
Thanks so much, Mickey.
Night-night and happy Father's Day to you both.
Thank you. Bars being Elsie, by the way. She was always the funnier.
We'll take a commercial break now, and after that, I want
See
to
what
play...
I mean?
After that, we'll play a record that has a very special message or a very special story attached to it, which Bert will tell us about.
Oh.
It's the program is Thanks for the Memories. My special guest is Bert Newton. I've got another record, one that you've selected, Bert, but there's something very special about the record that has meaning for you.
Yeah, it does. I might just mention before getting to that, Bill, if I may, I've been waiting for a mystery guest to come on for the time we've been together. I thought first up it was going to be Patti when I chose to play Oh My Papa. Then I thought it could have been my mother-in-law, Eunice. Hello, Bertie, how are you? Nothing to do. And then Mickey, I halfway through I thought, no, obviously he hasn't got Mickey on the line. And I just kept, and it really came then as a double surprise. So very, very, who'd you learn that from?
From you.
Yeah, I thought you might have. Two people who are very important to me in my radio career at 3UZ. were Colleen Hewitt and her former husband, Danny Finlay. Danny and Colleen were in America, endeavouring to get Colleen's career off the ground in the States. I think she's one of the greatest singers, one of the finest singers Australia has ever produced. She's a good cabaret, she's great on stage, and of course, recording-wise, she's superb. It didn't really happen for her in America, but I had the opportunity of helping Danny and Colleen stay in the States because we needed someone to look after an American office, Los Angeles office, for my 3 Ed program. And they did that for me and organised all the interviews and did a terrific job, particularly Danny, because Colleen was doing the rounds with her songs and hoping to get that break, which should have come, actually, and I wish it had for them. And I felt very, very close to them during that period, even though they were so many thousands of miles away. They then came back to Australia, and it's well known that they broke up, and Colleen went her way and Danny went his. And it's one of those situations, and a lot of people would identify with this, and that is when two friends break up, your own heart is divided into two, and that's not overstating the case, especially when you like them both, when you love them both. And when Colleen recorded this song, the first time I heard it, I had tears in my eyes, and even today, so many years after it was released, I still can't hear it without feeling very, very emotional, because I can identify so closely to all the highs and the lows that they had together as husband and wife, and also as manager and performer. And I've never asked Colleen the question. I don't think I've asked Danny the question. But I've always seen this song as Colleen's anthem to her former husband, the man who worked so hard for her career and who shared so much with her. See what I mean?
Brilliant song, isn't it?
And it just means so much to me for the reasons I gave you.
But you've always had a bit of a literary bent in lots of ways. I know you're very keen on the use of the English language. That's why I got picked up on saying alias before.
Well, strange to say, a lot of people pick me up on my use of grammar sometimes, because I've always believed in radio and television that communication is more important than pronunciation. And I'd never get a job at the ABC. Well, certainly wouldn't get a job at the ABC of old because of all the pronunciation you had to go through, and you had to read everything in every language, I think, under the sun, didn't you, back in the old years at the ABC? Anyway, I'm sorry, yes, I do like good literature, and I've done a couple of records, as a matter of fact, doing prose, and like the Bert and Patti family album. If you'd like the other copy, I've got it.
Oh, and also a little bit of verse. I understand you have a little piece for us this evening.
I can do one for you. Do you want something romantic, or do you want something which is very Australian?
I'll leave it to you.
Perhaps romantic, seeing that it's Father's Day. Let me in my mind choose which one I should do. Yeah, I think you like flowers, don't you, and nature and romance?
To a degree.
Mm-hmm. We'll see how you fare after this piece, if I can remember it. Thanks for the flowers you sent, she said, as she blushed and turned her lovely head. I'm sorry for the words I spoke last night. I was wrong, and you were right. And as we walked and talked in the evening hours, I thought to myself, what bloody flowers?
I had a final question, which was, is there anything you regret in your life? Maybe that was it, I'm not sure.
No regrets. I don't look back too often, unless it's to take stock of where my life is so far. I'm not an if-only person. Today is an important day. Yesterday is gone, and you pray for tomorrow.
But thank you very much indeed for being in Thanks for the Memories, even if we did swipe the title from you.
Well, you've swiped it, but I tell you what, you've done a darn good job with it. Excuse me. I can't understand why I'm doing all the coughing this week, and yet a fortnight ago, Gus Mercurio didn't cough once. And yet with that voice and what he's been through, he should have shattered the complete studio console. It's been a pleasure, Bill. Lovely seeing you again.
Thank you very much indeed. Bert Newton. Well, that's all, and thanks for the memories. I'll be back next Sunday evening between 7 and 8 when my guest will be Brian Naylor.
On 3AW will be Macquarie National News, followed by Remember When, with those two hilarious characters, Neville Wragg and Clark Sinclair.